Update for Judicial Watch here on Facebook Live. A lot to talk about here this week. As always, a big victory over the effort to undo ethics reform in the House of Representatives, led by your Judicial Watch. Big news in court this week about a new email scandal. Also, major news reported by Judicial Watch about the jihadist threat from Mexico. So a lot to talk about, plus a few other topics I want to throw in there if we have time. First up was the big news over what the House of Republicans tried to pull earlier this week. I was at home on Monday night. It was a federal holiday, and I started seeing the tweets about and emails about how the House Republicans had voted secretly to undo the Office of Congressional Ethics, and that is a semi-independent body that is charged by the Ethics Committee of the House to investigate and report on ethics violations. And they don't draw any conclusions. They investigate, they figure out what the facts are, and then send them to the Ethics Committee, where they're supposed to decide what to do with them. And as a result, as you might imagine, both Republicans and Democrats didn't like this process since it was timely and transparent. And so in the past, this was a reform that Judicial Watch was behind. We had actually worked with Nancy Pelosi back in the day to get this office set up. And then Democrats didn't like it because a lot of its members got caught up in a renewed and vigorous ethics process. And then, of course, Republicans didn't like it as well. And they've had these generalized complaints which really don't withstand scrutiny upon any consideration. But rather than just try to deal with it in a forthright way and reform it after public discussion and debate, they decided to do it in the dead of night in a secret vote. And Judicial Watch, frankly, helped lead the way in undoing it. We started tweeting about it Monday night. New York Times picked up on it. The media were focused on it, and especially because of Judicial Watch's role as a conservative watchdog. I understand the liberal media likes the idea of conservatives criticizing Republicans, are happy to play it up, but it does show our independence and that we call them like we see them. And even Donald Trump understood that this was a dumb move, and that he tweeted out he didn't understand why Republicans were focused on this issue as opposed to everything else they need to be focused on. And the Republicans, by noon the next day on Tuesday, held another meeting, closed-door meeting, and pulled back this effort to gut the Office of Congressional Ethics. And so it was a good victory for those of us who want a little more ethics, a little more transparency, a little more accountability, at least in the House of Representatives. But it shows you that eternal vigilance is necessary on these corruption issues. And it also shows you that the politicians in Washington don't understand the way voters think. They don't understand their views, or they don't have much care for them, in the sense that voters think Washington is terribly corrupt. They think Congress is corrupt, and they are oblivious to that. And it looks like the incoming president is a bit more sensitive to it, given the fact he ran on draining the swamp. This isn't the first time, and this is, I'll just call out the dishonesty of Democrats in complaining about Republicans here, because there are many Democrats who would like to see this office undone as well. And we fought back Democratic attempts to undo this office back in 2010 and 2012 and 2014. I was looking back at our comments at the time, and we talked about draining the swamp back then. And I remember Nancy Pelosi beat the Republicans in 2006 and took over the House based on the campaign slogan, draining the swamp. And, I don't understand why Republicans don't understand that is a major issue for the American people. They lost the House one time, or at least in 2006 over this, and they won in 1994 over the corruption in the House. Yet they just want to stick it to the American people. They don't really care what they think if it means protecting themselves from investigations. and accountability. So, and we've been, many of our friends and folks we work with on the Hill don't agree with us on this, but, this is a principled position, and we think there needs to be a stronger ethics process on the House, not a weakened one. So this was a major victory, and it shows that Judicial Watch is against corruption no matter the party. And when Republicans do the wrong thing, we call them out on it. And I tell you, the Trump administration is going to learn if they don't follow the rule of law, we'll call them out on it. And we're hopeful they start doing things differently. And Trump has shown some sensitivity about corruption issues, but we're going to be policing them as independently as we can, and certainly without regard for party. Major court developments this week in another email scandal. The Obama gang isn't satisfied with having one Hillary Clinton-like scandal. They're creating a new one over at the Department of Homeland Security, another sensitive agency dealing with classified information. The Department of Homeland Security people did not like the idea of their employees accessing their Google email and Yahoo email personal accounts via DHS computers. Because what was happening is they were clicking on these phishing emails and causing all sorts of security issues over at the agency. So they said we have to have a rule that you can't access your accounts, your Yahoo.com account or Google Gmail account via agency computers because of these security issues that we're grappling with. So they instituted the rule, and Judicial Watch, through our litigation, found that the rule was instituted, yet Secretary Johnson, Jay Johnson, the head of DHS, got a waiver immediately. He never had to comply with the rule simply because he liked to check his emails. Other top agency officials didn't want to comply with the rules because they said they used their personal email accounts to conduct government business. Unbelievable. So what Judicial Watch did was we asked for the emails on these personal email accounts that were government business related. And the government, the Obama administration has stonewalled us tooth and nail on this. And we've asked the courts to preserve, we asked the court earlier this year, or I guess it's last year now, to order the Department of Homeland Security to preserve those emails in the least. Now, of course, we're coming up on the end of the administration, and I think there are at least 2 or 3 of the officials we're interested in are still in the agency. Others have left, and we want a preservation order. We want the court to order the agency to preserve these records and in the least. And so we had a hearing on this yesterday, and I don't know if the court is going to grant our preservation order request. He was a little bit skeptical about it, unfortunately, but he really grilled the government because he asked the agency, he said, we've had this big Judicial Watch appellate ruling, which I told you about earlier, where the State Department, John Kerry, was told by the appellate court in no uncertain terms that it isn't good enough just to ask Mrs. Clinton for her emails back. The law requires you to go to the Attorney General and ask for his help as well, or her help in the case of Loretta Lynch. So that's the new law here. This is the interpretation of the law here in the district. So now, what has the Department of Homeland Security done? Have they gotten all these emails that may have government records embroiled, or have they gotten government email records off of these personal accounts? Is there classified information on these accounts? The court asked the government yesterday, it's been 5 or 6 months, have you done anything to get the records? And all they said in response was, well, we asked them to preserve them. Now, some of them have left the agency already, and you can imagine how that's going to work. So they're now creating new Hillary Clinton-type email scandals as we speak. And the State Department's excuse was, we didn't know what Hillary was doing. Here they let them do it, and they still haven't done anything to get the government records back. So this is a scandal that's ongoing. We're on it. The court ordered them to at least give him an idea of what they asked these individuals to do so he can figure out what, if anything else, the court needs to do to make sure those records aren't destroyed. But the scandal is continuing. And it's funny, the next hearing is scheduled for, I think, February. And what's interesting is that will be during the Trump administration. So it's going to be a big test for the Trump administration because all of Judicial Watch's lawsuits on the Department of Homeland Security for records, or the IRS for records, or the State Department for the Clinton emails. They're all going to be now handled by appointees of President Trump. So it's going to be interesting to see how they react and whether they're going to finally bring a new approach to transparency and the rule of law, or is it just going to be more of the same? And, you know, if I were a betting man, I'd say more of the same, because I've had experience is with the Bush administration and the transition from the Clinton administration. They didn't change one whit in terms of the legal secrecy and the willingness to defend violations of FOIA. But, you know, if anyone's just going to surprise us, it might be President Trump. So let's hope, and frankly, you should encourage him and his appointees to follow the rule of law and transparency and start enforcing the Freedom of Information Act, as opposed to going to court and defending its violation repeatedly in cases that Judicial Watch and other transparency folks are pursuing. So this is a big issue. Another big issue, and there's a lot going on this week, and maybe this should have been the headline, is that we have reporting on our Corruption Chronicles blog, which you can see on our website at judicialwatch.org, and this is the headline: Jihadists train plan U.S. attack from Mexican border state. An internal law enforcement report, a Mexican law enforcement report obtained by Judicial Watch, confirms that Islamic terrorists have people along the border and who are only waiting for the order and the time to carry out a simultaneous attack in the different ports of entry or cities of the United States of America. Drug cartels have a working agreement with Islamic terrorists, according to a high-ranking Mexican police administrator who said that men from the Middle East arrive regularly into the country to train jihadists. And supposedly, according to our source, these groups just sent a bunch of various Middle Eastern, these evil groups, that's the quote, sent a bunch of folks to Monterrey Airport in just the last few days alone, in Monterrey in Mexico. This is a major issue. Judicial Watch has been virtually alone in reporting and extensively updating the American people about the jihadi threat as a result of the cartel terrorist connections and our open borders. And you're going to see news this week about the effort to build the wall. And as I've said repeatedly, and you may have seen our last Facebook update, or a recent one, where we talked about how Latin America, there's a Spanish Defense Ministry report talking about Latin America as a hotbed for ISIS and Al-Qaeda fundraising and planning, that we can't wait for a wall. We need to think about a military deployment to the border. I'm not saying that should be for sure, but that's something we need to consider, because this threat is imminent, it's ongoing, and I don't even think a wall is going to be sufficient given the nature of the threat. Another issue is we're in the Supreme Court again. We filed a brief late last week on our gerrymandering challenge in Maryland. If you look at the congressional district maps of Maryland, you'll see, as the Washington Post said, it's an exercise in cubism. The Maryland politicians treat voters in Maryland like cattle, and they've thrust them into these serpentine districts that make no sense. And Judicial Watch thinks that the politicians shouldn't be able to pick their voters, that the voters should be able to pick the politicians. And that's what gerrymandering is about. And we have a very, I think, influential or incisive way of thinking about this, that if districts should look compact. And if they're not compact, they're probably unconstitutionally suspect, and we think the Supreme Court should take that up. But it's a major issue, and the Democrats are raising gerrymandering issues as in their war against Republicans, and that's the politics of it. But this is an issue. Maryland is a Democrat state, but Republicans are tempted to do this as well. And gerrymandering is a corruption of their districting process. And I don't believe that politics should be completely being taken out of redistricting, but it should not be abused for corrupt purposes. And you shouldn't be, for instance, if you're in Maryland, think of the panhandle of Maryland, northwest Maryland, which is virtually goes into western Pennsylvania or follows the borders along Pennsylvania almost to the Great Lakes, you shouldn't be in the same district as someone down close to Washington, D.C. Obviously, that's not your community, and communities should be treated as accordingly in the districting process, and communities that are torn apart in their own states to help politicians retain or obtain office is just corrupt and arguably unconstitutional, and that's what we're raising in the Supreme Court. Other big news, I just had another comment on the Russian hacking. I talked about it last week. I think it's spin. I think it's a scam. I have no doubt the Russians were playing games and were probably hacking and behind hacking attempts and the Democrats and such. But let's be clear here, the Russians have been hacking and influencing our elections and politics for a long time. And the news this week, for instance, that our intelligence community recorded Russian leadership being excited about Donald Trump doesn't tell you jack. It doesn't tell you jack about what their intent was in releasing material of either John Podesta or the Democratic National Committee. I believe you can also conclude that the Russians were trying to weaken Hillary Clinton, who everyone expected was going to win the presidency. It didn't mean that they were trying to obtain a specific outcome, but they were trying to influence Hillary Clinton. And I'm interested to know if our intelligence communities recorded Russian reactions to Obama winning in 2012 and Obama winning in 2008. Remember, Mitt Romney was seen as the anti-Russian candidate in 2012. Were Russians happy as a result of Obama winning? Probably. Did it mean they, quote, hacked the election, which is the dishonest description of what even the intelligence shows, assuming it's all correct? Of course not. So this is just political spin, I think, this Russian hacking, and it doesn't mean you have to be against the intelligence communities to be suspicious of the conclusions that are being drawn without foundation by the politicians trying to spin the intelligence. I think, don't you believe what you're hearing from the media about this, and don't you think that the politicians running the intelligence agencies under the corrupt Obama administration are above distorting what the information they have is showing. Another big issue, you have all these Trump cabinet picks coming up for hearings next week. And I would focus your attention on the appointee of Mr. Trump to the Attorney General position, which is Senator Jeff Sessions, the Republican from Alabama. Jeff Sessions is someone known as being a law and order guy, obviously hardcore, maybe not obviously, so you know. He's been a leader in trying to enforce the rule of law on immigration. And, the left is pretending and slandering him as a racist. He's not a racist. It's a big lie. If you disagree with the left on anything, you're a racist. So there's going to be big pressure on the Sessions issue. And he's going to be confirmed, but you should support Mr. Sessions' confirmation, I think. And if you do, or if you don't, you should let your views be known. And you should do that by calling the Senate, asking for your senators, or you can send them letters or emails, but you should probably call because the hearings, I think, will be next Wednesday. So start calling. It's 202-224-3121, 202-224-3121. So what the left is trying to do is manufacture opposition to Jeff Sessions in order to constrain him from doing good work in the Justice Department, from reining in their office's their Civil Rights Division, which is out of control, from enforcing the rule of law on immigration, from investigating Hillary Clinton. I mean, that's what the attacks on Jeff Sessions are about. Even that's what the Russian hacks are about. The hacking spin is about. It's to distract from the fact that Hillary Clinton still needs to be prosecuted, and they want emails to be conflated in the public's mind with Russia hacking as opposed to illegal national security violations and bribery, extortion, and pay-to-play from Hillary Clinton. So, I mean, there's a big game going on here, and you should be aware of it. It doesn't mean we're supportive of particular policy outcomes or, that the politics of it, we're in favor of one party or the other. but we have to understand that there are many here in Washington that don't like the rule of law. And that means going after people like Jeff Sessions. It means by misusing intelligence to distract from those here in our government who broke the law in terms of national security violations. So a lot going on. Big ethics victory, a new email scandal that we're uncovering at the Obama administration. I mean, they've still got maybe, 10, 15 days left, and they're still violating the law. Gerrymandering in Maryland, cabinet picks, and the Russian hacking scandal, and it is a scandal in many respects. So we're covering it all at Judicial Watch, and we're your watchdog in Washington, and you can count on us to tell you straight as best as we're able. So thanks for joining us, and I hope the new year has been treating you well so far, and I wish you all the best and for a wonderful and prosperous 2017. Happy New Year.